Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? Alright, welcome to the 500th review on this channel, at least according to the playlist. So this is the 500th Spectacular, which is going to have zero differences from the 499 Spectaculars that preceded it, other than all the fancy zeros. And the first one of those reviews was a Youngblood book, so I figure, why not make the video with all the zeros a Youngblood book as well? We'll tie the room together. We're looking today at Youngblood Deluxe, number 2. So this is the kind of refurbished version of Youngblood that was released as a trade paperback back in, I want to say, 2013, somewhere around there. So basically, Rob, I guess, wasn't particularly proud of the way, like the presentation for the comic, which I can understand from a 2008 standpoint. I was wrong about the year. That's when it was released. But Rob's a guy who's always thought that he can fix whatever mistakes are in a book by just hiring the right colorist. And he's always made it pretty clear that he was unsatisfied with the script in the original version of Youngblood, seeing as how he threw Hank Canals under the bus for his script early on when the quality of the book was called into question. So we've got modern colors on this, modern for 2008, which is quite a bit different from 1991. And we got a completely different script now from Joe Casey. And yeah, they do a little interesting thing here where they kind of mix and match pages and sometimes like blow up art and duplicate it to try and make the story flow a little better, or just kind of try and get around the fact that, the original version of this had ads and this version doesn't. So I already did a video taking a look at the first issue of this, and honestly, I thought it was a much better version of Youngblood number 1. Reordering the pages actually helped it flow a lot better. Obviously, the script is going to be just way, way better. Rob didn't do any favors for Hank Canals when he, called him out for a substandard script. But it's hard to argue that the script in those first few issues was any kind of good. Of course, the funny thing about that is that there was no set timeline when he was putting out that first issue. He wasn't on a schedule at that point yet. Like, you think what he would have done was gotten the script, reviewed it, and then decided on a release date after that. But I'm guessing that never happened, or, maybe when he got the script, he thought it was fine. That wouldn't surprise me either. I don't think Liefeld can really discern quality. I don't think he's ever been able to. That might explain why he thinks he's a good Wolverine artist. Then 2 issues go out, they start talking shit about the script, and it's like, oh no, that's the scripter's fault. Yeah, we're not bringing him back. Never mind the fact that Rob was the one acting as editor on that book, and it was up to him to make sure that it was up to snuff. But, up to snuff is not really a term that Rob has ever been worried about. I feel like maybe I haven't talked shit about Rob in a while, because this is getting kind of nasty kind of early, isn't it? Let's forget all about that. Let's start with the book itself. So this is, of course, a remastered version of Youngblood number 2, as I said. So we can start with the cover. This is the original cover to Youngblood number 2. And the question, I suppose, is this a better version of the colors? And I think, yeah, it is. It's a lot crisper. There's like 17 years of advances in digital color along the way. So that's not really any kind of surprise. This is maybe one of the best Youngblood covers, thinking about it. You know what? I think I'd rank it number 3. From the original run, anyway. Number 1 has to be Youngblood number 8, with whatever his fucking name is, flying at us with his greasy fucking ginger soul patch, or lack of soul patch, I guess. Sorry, John. Number 2, I think, is Youngblood number 0. There's a fair amount of effort in that cover. But yeah, I think this is, for a drawing, I think this is number 3. This is when Rob is still trying on covers. It wouldn't last for too much longer. Rob would quickly realize that he could just boost a comic's sales by drawing a cover himself, and thereby kind of insinuating that maybe he's drawing the interior as well, and of course he wouldn't be. And I don't think it was long for him doing that to him realizing, you know what, the most important thing on a cover is the signature. That's the only thing that gets people buying. So there's no point putting effort into anything else. Okay, so credits on this: Rob Liefeld, creator, story, art. Story is Marvel method. So basically just Rob drew pages, and it was up to, I think, Hank Canals at the time to fill those pages with dialogue. Script, Joe Casey. Better do a good job, Joe. Colors, Matt Yackey. And Matt Yackey does a fine job on this. I don't believe he's the colorist Rob is working with these days. He does seem to burn through them pretty quick. I don't know how Matt Yackey feels about working with Rob. I know I've heard, kind of through the grapevine, that a lot of people work with Rob for a while and then decide they don't need to do that anymore. So before we get any further, I got to stop and let you guys know that today is the last day of the Blood Force Kickstarter. Blood Force is the comic book I've been working on for the last few years. It's a satire of 90s extreme comics very much like this one. Finishes up at 4 o'clock Pacific time today. So that's, 7 o'clock Eastern. So if you haven't checked it out, this is your last chance to do so. There's 4 variant covers. Original art from the comic book is on offer. You can also get prints. And later today, I will be doing a live stream to close out the campaign where I'm going to be doing some sketching. And then at the end of it, I will be giving away the sketch to one of the backers. So again, if you haven't pledged on the book yet, you won't be eligible for that, unfortunately. So go check out the campaign, see if it's something you might dig. If it is, hey, make your pledge. You just might end up getting some free art out of it. So that also means this is the last promo for these that I'm going to be doing for a little while. So, again, this episode's a cause for celebration. But anyway, enough of my crap. Back to this crap. Okay, so this one is going to be a lot more loyal to the original layout of Youngblood number 2. That was one of the most interesting things about Youngblood Deluxe number 1, was just like what page is going to be coming next? Is it even going to be from Youngblood number 1? Because there were a few pages from Youngblood number 2 that got slotted in. That is one difference, yeah, I guess. Because the beginning of Youngblood number 2 had the Berserkers, with them doing their fight in the future and all that kind of stuff. All of this, these 4 pages here, that all got put into Youngblood Deluxe number 1, and it worked a lot better. That does leave kind of a problem of what's left for issue 2, because they're not really adding pages in this one. So really the main differences on this one are going to be colors and the script. The script is fine. We're going to start with a little bit about Prophet, which we didn't get the first time around because Liefeld didn't have any idea about who Prophet really was other than Extreme Captain America. Basically, what would happen if Captain America put on fencing headgear? He'd be unstoppable. But here we're going to get Joe Casey kind of giving hints about what the origin for this version of Prophet is. So he has memories. They are buried deep down inside his unconscious mind, but they exist. A father lost, killed by a madman, the desperation of a family struggling to survive, a boy makes a fateful choice, a choice to evolve. So none of this really got touched on, I don't believe, in the first run through on Prophet, at least not during the Youngblood issues. I don't believe in the first volume of Prophet issues. Might have been gone over in the second volume of Prophet issues. I'm not for sure. Fine look, I don't like how much work the colorist is doing, though, but that's more personal preference. This is more of a modern look for colors where he's kind of making his presence known. I think the colors should more serve the comic as they would have in the early 90s. It didn't always look as flashy, but I think it was less of a distraction. It's not always going to be a problem. I think this version here works fine for the most part, and the previous version of this spread was a lot cheesier. I'm going to say this was colored by Brian Murray before I even check. Let me just see. Color design, Brian Murray. Yep, you can kind of tell he gets a little bit weird with the colors, and he likes doing weird shit like this kind of diffusion on the tank, which actually, that diffusion kind of looks nice. These colors are friggin' puke, but yeah, he's doing all sorts of stuff with highlights all over everybody, and it doesn't always work. So, this is a cleaner version of that anyway. Again, those colors are a lot less distracting now. So the only real difference in the story in this, there's a couple, I guess. The biggest one is that it's made clear that Prophet is a German super soldier, which is mentioned in the first one, but then he just kind of talks in English, and it's just kind of thrown at the wayside. Here he starts out talking in German. Oh yes, we get the repeat of the previous page. So, the doctor here gives the breakdown on who Prophet is a little bit. That, he's a super soldier experiment and that he's been cryogenically frozen for, 40, 50 years. And, everybody kind of reacts. And then when we get the close-up on him, like, ooh, mysterious. Actually, what it was is that originally there was an ad on the next page turn. But the thing is, if we just leave this here, there's double page spreads coming very quickly. There's a couple in this issue. So all of the places that were left open for ads, there's nothing to fill those anymore. So you just kind of have to repeat previous artwork. Either that or Rob wasn't paying attention to page turns when he originally did the layouts, which I'm a little bit more inclined to believe. We get a little bit of history about the Prophet project, not a whole lot. But then, like Prophet is still meant to be a mysterious figure that we're going to expand on later. Theoretically, I can't imagine that. Well, you know what? I was going to say, I can't imagine Rob thought he was going to do another Prophet series anytime soon. I can imagine that. What am I talking about? Rob always thinks he's got series coming out. He thinks he's got movies coming out. Generally, what he's got are single issues, and then a car alarm goes off somewhere, and he's completely forgotten it ever happened. But it is interesting going back over this art and just seeing like how much effort he used to put back into a page at this time. Like, I think he really took pride in the fact that, okay, I'm starting my own company. This is all on me. So I got to make this look as good as I can. And I think this is probably the best issue he's ever drawn. I don't think he drew these tech things in the background. I think probably Richard Horry helped him with that. I think it was Richard Horry. But like the figures themselves, there's always a lot of detail on everything. Like there's a lot of try in these first, I'd say, 3 issues. It's not until issue 4 when he discovers Kiko Taganashi and discovers that, wait a minute, if I get a good colorist, I can ease up. And it's all downhill from there. Okay, so in this version, they discover the Prophet, not corpse exactly, but the Prophet project during the attack on Hassan Hussein's bunker from back in Youngblood Deluxe #1. That may have been the intention in the original version of Youngblood, but it was never really made clear. It just seemed like, okay, that was an adventure. Here's a new adventure. We have a Captain America, and I cannot wait until issue 4 to put it out. So at least there's a little bit of cause and effect. They find this dude in a purple leotard in Hassan Hussein's basement. And they're like, we got to snatch that up and bring that back to the States with us. So that's their mission here. They do kind of say, like, why the fuck was this in that guy's basement? And then they never really touch on that. Maybe they will later on. I'm not for sure. So, Combat and Cougar get up close. Combat and Cougar have a pretty combative relationship in this. I don't know if they were supposed to. I get the feeling it was a bit more just kind of like competitive spirit in the original version of this story. Here, Combat just clearly does not like Cougar and is not happy about the fact that he's forced to work with him. And he also doesn't like the fact that Prophet is very clearly a warrior, but he's stuck in this cryo tube. And as far as Combat knows, he's never actually seen Combat. So he gets this like Klingon sadness for this warrior that's never gone through a trial by fire. And in the initial version of this, Cougar was fucking around with the buttons on the cryo tank, and that's what causes the reaction in the tube. In this, they're just trying to move it, so it makes it a little bit less like Cougar's just a flat-out dumbass. But either way, the tube reacts and sends them flying. This has always been kind of a fun pose. I like this one, where, Combat gets just bent backwards. There's some fun early Liefeld stuff going on here, where you get, like, patterns in the background, because Rob has templates, and it's a lot easier than drawing anything back there. Matt Yackey has to do a whole lot more with these than Brian Murray did in the original version. But, you look at all the shiny stuff all over, and I'm like, that didn't really need to be there. And, you get the glow in the, I guess it's all right. I just don't like, I don't think the flashy color works as well with someone like Liefeld's style. Anyway, they set off the tube, they awaken Prophet. He's about 20 heads tall, and they're kind of unsure about how to proceed at first, whether they think they think maybe he'll attack. And at first they kind of try and, make verbal contact. With Cougar here saying, sprechen Sie English? Which is a fun touch, because, they know the deal that he's supposed to be German. So I completely forgot how this went originally. I'm like, oh shit, did they, start trying to talk and then there's a misunderstanding? It's like, no, I forgot. Prophet looks at Cougar, and Cougar goes, oh, fuck you, buddy, and goes leaping in with all his speed lines. Doesn't do a goddamn thing. Prophet flips him off him. I gotta imagine Joe Casey's looking at this going, how the hell do I make this make sense? So his way to go about this is when Cougar says sprechen Sie English, Prophet responds in German and then starts talking in English, which sets Cougar off. He says, okay, you obviously don't know your ass from your elbow yet. Perfect opportunity to send you back to Slumberland before you end up hurting yourself. Nothing personal, bro. So, it's still stupid, but there's no way to make that intelligent. And, now it's a fight, so you're justified in having everybody else join in the fight. So he takes Cougar out, Combat joins in, and he's kind of whooping him around a little bit. Uh, this is at a time when Liefeld was a little better about actually having his guys look like they're making some kind of contact. He's absolutely god-awful at that these days. But just like you look at the effort in the figures, like obviously there's going to be no effort in the backgrounds. There never will be. It's never been a priority for Liefeld, and it was dumb to ever expect that it would become a priority for him. But he likes drawing dudes leaping and, punching and flexing. So since he liked doing that, at least in 1991, he did it a lot. There's like fun musculature going on in here. This is it's a kind of a standard pose, but it's nicely expressed, I think. And again, a lot of detail. These are some hairy dudes too. I don't think he bothers too much with body hair these days. When someone scowls, they get all the stretch marks across their face. Like this is the classic Liefeld everybody remembers. I'm not saying exactly that it's good, but it's a whole lot better than what we got these days. And again, this shot of combat here, this is a pretty good shot actually. There's a couple in here. Fun angle, popping them out from the panel border a bit. And again, like a whole bunch of detail all over the all over the figure, as you expect. Get the bit where Prophet's like slamming him around the room that Richard Horry drew, and then they're having a kick fight in front of a furnace. Again, Liefeld has templates, and he must let everybody know about the templates. And it starts getting the upper hand on combat, so Sentinel has to join in. And that's a pretty bad punch panel, really. Just because, you can't fit the both of them in there very cleanly and have it look like he's making contact. Again, I'm a little bit more inclined to let it slide just because he put obvious effort into the figures themselves. More templates. Templates everywhere. He really likes that one template with the skinny rectangles. Okay, so then Riptide and Brahma get into it, and Riptide conjures up a tidal blast from the concrete. Makes perfect sense. And Brahma runs in for the kill here. Fun shot of Riptide here. That's about as good as I think Rob's ever drawn a woman. It's a silly drawing, and she's missing a little bit of neck. But you know what? It's fine. And her waist is almost like normal human size. Her legs are ridiculously long. She's like 3 or 4 torsos high. But, it's still fine compared to later stuff. So anyway, yeah, Brahma runs in, and then we get repurposed art. Again, so photocopied from right here. I can't imagine he ever thought Brahma was a cool character. He rarely uses them, and he didn't really think about coming up with a decent look for him. What is this one from? That almost looks like Maren Michaels or something. Is it from one of these previous pages? Oh, that's where it's from. Okay. And of course, the reason that this was there was because the page count was kind of off. Again, because the letters page was in the way here. This one is much more indicative to me that Rob just drew pages and wasn't watching the page counts. Because you don't do that. You always put it at the back. You only put it in the middle of the book in like desperate straits when you fucked up. So instead, we got to have them zooming together because there's a double page spread on the page turn. We get that famous Prophet neck crack that it still is underwhelming. You would have thought, 30 years later, he would have gone, you know what, we can make that crack a little bit bigger. You know what, I think they did. I don't know, they just kind of thickened up the letters a little bit, really. If you put a big, jagged crack in there, that'll work a whole lot better. Or, you know what you could do. So this particular example wouldn't really work in this context. But it's just kind of an extreme example of what you can do if you give a shit about your craft. Or, you hire people who give a shit about their craft, which Rob has also never really prioritized. But this is from Cerebus, number 174. It's going to be a while before we get to this one in the reviews. But this is from a sequence in which the antagonist of this particular storyline, Siren, there's an assassination attempt made on her life, which is foiled. She gets the would-be assassin down on the ground when he begs for mercy. She steps on his head, shattering it, and it's horrific. And the horror is accentuated by the lettering here as we get his scream just kind of transmuting into this cracking sound effect. And it's not even like he shattered the letters. It's more like they're splintering. And it just kind of underscores everything. It's absolutely horrifying, really. Now, am I expecting that kind of thing in a Youngblood book? Well, shit, no. You know, Dave Sim, on top of being a good writer, was also one of the best letterers in the business. Why? Because he gave a shit about that aspect of his craft. He gave a shit about every aspect. But that was one of the things he really honed in on as something he could improve over time. And he just constantly did. So I just imagine like a big kind of overwhelming shattering or splintering sound effect, like a crack, that kind of thing, instead of this. And it kind of gives this a little bit more weight, you know? That was a weird little tangent to take. Anyway, naturally, Prophet recovers from that. Everybody's astounded, and they keep piling on. In this one, instead of yelling platitudes, instead of like yelling cliches about how he's going down, they're trying to convince him that the war is over while they're punching him in the face. And there's an interesting bit where like Prophet's like confused. He's like, no, you're trying to distract me. Again, like you wouldn't get that in the original version. It's people yelling with exclamation points. So he's convinced that they're servants of Darkthorn. Then their version of the boom tube opens up. So the crash tunnel, and then actual servants of Darkthorn bust in. They immediately kill the doctor who was filling them in on everything. And that automatically gets everybody on the same side going, oh, those are the guys we're supposed to be mad at. And now they're all going to be teamed up against these, you know, like decent looking giant robot things that Rob Liefeld did not have a hand in drawing. I'm quite sure. I think these are Richard Horry designs. If you're unsure, you can always go back and check out that backup feature that he did in early Extreme titles. Infinity, that was it. All right. Yeah, tech in that looks very similar to this tech here. But yeah, so they show up. I do recall that the original line that they said was resistance is futile, because I guess that had just come out on TV. Instead, now they go, all units, target opposition reprogram for multi-level assault maneuver, extinguish all life, leave nothing standing, all hail Darkthorn. So, you know, it's a bit more standard. We're ripping off New Gods instead of TNG. That's probably more appropriate. Sentinel goes, wild guess here. They're not of this earth, are they? And Prophet says, they are not. They are warriors forged within the fires of decay. And Riptide says, Jesus, they're moving in fast, team. Watch it. And it looks like she gets cut off. And it's like, oh shit, how are they going to wrap this one up? They're not. That's the end of that particular issue. Because the actual end of that issue, you know, you got this sequence here where they're much more garishly colored. Again, Brian Murray doing his weird Brian Murray shit. And then the Berserkers leap into action, including Wildmane's naked ass. Remember that? Yeah, you do. But I'm pretty sure we used that splash in the first one, and this is more edited for the trade. And Rob didn't do any additional editing. He didn't create any additional art or anything. Didn't even try and repurpose some old images to try and give this more of a satisfactory ending. Now that he's doing the deluxe editions. You know, at the time when they're doing it for the trade, that makes sense, where you can just segue into the next issue. That's fine, provided that you can come up with a good enough transition, which I'm sure Joe Casey could. In the actual single issues, you want something a little less sudden than that, I feel like. But again, I don't think Rob really recognizes. Yeah, maybe you want some kind of cliffhanger. It's like, well, that's kind of a cliffhanger, right? These guys showed up. They're probably bad. You want to turn up for the next issue and see what the bad guys are going to do. It's like, you knew this shit a little bit better in 1991, man. What happened? Anyway, we get our preview for Youngblood Deluxe number 3. I don't like this version of the cover at all. Like the coloring on this, that doesn't work, in my opinion. I like the original version better. We're going to get a bit of a missive here about Youngblood 87. So Rob talking about when he first got into comics, how he went to a convention, took his portfolio with him, including some pages that he put together for the original Youngblood idea. And there was all sorts of comic groups at this convention. So a lot of small press guys, he kind of lists them off here, including Dark Horse, First Comics. Like Dark Horse in 1987 would have been just starting out. I don't know if they were actually there or he just listing some guys who probably would have been active at that time. But Dark Horse, First Comics, Comico, Eclipse, and Megaton, in addition to Marvel and DC. You know, it's a comic convention in the mid to late 80s. Like, there were a lot of small press publishers that, you know, you could just get some work at back in the day. And he talks about how all the smaller press guys turned him away, didn't want anything to do with him. Dick Giordano from DC saw his portfolio and was considering him for future work. And then he took it over to Mark Grunwald, who was representing Marvel, and he wanted to hire him for something. And in the meantime, he'd also shown it to Megaton, and they wanted to publish Youngblood as a series. And I think most of that holds up. You know, Rob doesn't seem to mince words too much about how things started out for him. Because, I mean, things always went very well for Rob in comics, like just ridiculously well, way better than they ever should have. But what he's including in this is bits from that Youngblood miniseries. Well, I mean, okay, he didn't actually do the miniseries, but he's going to include the portfolio pages that he originally came up with for a proposed Youngblood miniseries, as well as the cover that was put together for Megaton. And this was inked by Jerry Ordway. And from what I heard from the guy who was running Megaton at the time, I don't remember his name right now, but like Rob Liefeld was getting a little bit of work at Megaton on some like short stories or something on compilation books, I think. Well, I think the Megaton book was a compilation book. And they put this ad out, and there was no interest from retailers. So the guy's like, okay, and that's when I knew that things were going downhill, because like I put out a wraparound cover, penciled by Rob Liefeld, inked by Jerry Ordway, and there was no interest from retail. So it's just like, okay, I just can't drum up interest then. It's interesting seeing this early version of Liefeld, where he's far less influenced by guys like Art Adams. Like, this is much more of a George Perez influenced Liefeld, I would say. Like there's a lot of stiffness to the figures. All the faces look the same. They all kind of have a bit of a George Perez look. But you think about the alternate universe where he's primarily influenced by George Perez, and he sticks around in comics, and he doesn't really take off for no reason. He just kind of works at his craft and, maybe gets better over the years. Like, isn't that a weird idea? There's the original version of the Youngblood lineup. Still has trouble with those hands, but honestly, these are better hands that he can draw a couple of years later. I feel like Liefeld learned early that if at first you don't succeed, stop trying. Somebody else will fix it. Because that was the deal on Hawk and Dove. When he did shitty hands and feet, and instead of, maybe inking the shitty hands and feet and like trying to point out for the next issue, okay, this is what you should be doing. The inker, which I believe was Carl Kessel, redrew the hands and feet for him. So going forward, Rob just didn't bother drawing hands and feet because he knew that Carl Kessel would do it. So like, again, at this time, he's working at it. And like, you can see a path where he would improve. But he just, it seems like Rob learned all the wrong lessons about drawing early. Maybe he learned all the right ones about marketing and about, being a businessman. Because that aspect has always worked out well for Rob. The actual story itself, not a whole lot going on in this. This is kind of a tryout story, which apparently is the kind of thing that he liked a lot when he would read about it in Justice League, where there's an opening in Youngblood and they're allowing all of these, like no-name superheroes to come in. So yeah, we get much more George Perez influenced everything, including like page design. Like look at all the small panels going on in here. Nothing super creative going on, although, he does go for an extreme Dutch angle here with popping him out beyond the panel border. So that's an early sign of that. Again, you think about when this was drawn, and I believe he said he was like 17 at the time he went to the convention. So when, like, for a 17-year-old, this is pretty good. It's not, quite prime time ready or anything. But, like if the guy's diligent and he puts in work and he churns out issues, you can see this guy becoming a pretty good artist, theoretically. So yeah, this is just them turning down the first guy. But this is also interesting because we get the first appearance of Brigade. I always assumed Brigade was just, I need an extra team. If I have 2 books, that means double the revenue. But it looks like Brigade is largely here in 1987. We've got Cold Snap, we've got Thermal, we've got Seahawk, although in this case he's Sea Wolf. We got a dude with a braid, who I don't believe is meant to be Battlestone. But like, a lot of the team is here. So that's kind of fascinating. And I don't believe this part was ever inked because he was just putting these together as pencils. So yeah, there's no ink lines or anything. This was all just kind of upscaled, but that's fine in this case. Just kind of an interesting look at pages like you wouldn't see otherwise. They're not the best looking pages, but like I said, there's definite potential. And then eventually he turned into this, like this pose is okay, because this is the one pose that Rob Liefeld will draw for covers. So at least he gets practice at that. Composition itself sucks. We got our floating heads in the background here. The floating heads are a little bit better than usual, just the placement of them. But I love the fact that he's putting this up in here. Like, this has been out for, like, this, the Youngblood Deluxe is a 2025 release. So this has been out for a couple of years, I think. So he probably has heard feedback that this is shit. But he's still putting it up like he's proud of it. But I don't think Rob listens to that kind of feedback anymore anyway. You know, it's very clear that Rob Liefeld is of the mindset that if you make money, that means the thing is good. Where did he learn that from? Todd McFarlane. That's right. So anyway, that's Youngblood Deluxe number 2. Not as interesting as Youngblood Deluxe number 1, although, you know, there's still a few bits to talk about here and there. I'll go through issues 3 and 4 and see if there's enough to talk about in those. I'm really looking forward to seeing what issue 5 looks like because, of course, like for one thing, that's like 3/4 of an issue drawn by Chappie Ape. Like, did he add stuff to that? I think he did, from what I've heard. And I've also heard it ain't good. So I am looking forward to that coming out. So far, that isn't on the market, I don't believe. Maybe they're still figuring out what the fuck to do with that ending. In the meantime, you know, there's always Liefeld stuff to go over. I'm going to see about getting his new Youngblood number 1. I feel like it deserves a little bit of a run-through. You know, it did get run through over on Rob Norton's channel. No reason why I can't pile on. Only reason I'll be getting mine late is because I refuse to pay retail price for any Rob Liefeld product. You know, Rob's a bit more dedicated than I am in that regard. So, you know, we'll definitely hit that one at some point. But for this one anyway, that's going to do it. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you like this video, please hit the like button. It helps with all the algorithm stuff. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. And if you really want to help out, in the description, there's a link to my Patreon. If you go subscribe there, that'll give you access to everything I do. So all sorts of videos, everything to do with the Blood Force comic, including everything to do with the Blood Force Kickstarter. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions. So yeah, that'll do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.